President Trump's longtime attorney, Michael Cohen, says Mr. Trump knew about the infamous meeting with the Russians who have claimed to have dirt on Hillary Clinton. Just hours ago, the president unleashed an attack on his former fixer, Cohen, saying, quote, "I did not know of the meeting with my son, Don Jr." Sounds to me like someone is trying to make up stories in order to get himself out of an unrelated jam. This, of course, was in response to that explosive overnight reporting. A knowledgeable source telling NBC News Cohen is willing to inform Robert Mueller that then-candidate Donald Trump knew about the infamous June 2016 Trump Tower meeting in advance. Cohen's attorney, Lanny Davis, provided no comment. Don Jr.'s attorney refuted the report, calling it, quote, false. Cohen's claims directly contradict Don Jr.'s congressional testimony in September of 2017, continuing what seems to be a shifting story that never ends. All right, let's rewind to 2 years ago. June 7th, 2016, Donald Trump Jr. told British publicist Rob Goldstone, "How about 3 at our offices? Thanks, Rob. Appreciate you helping set it up." That put into motion the infamous meeting in Trump Tower. In the same email exchange, he responded to an offer of, quote, dirt on Hillary Clinton by saying, "If it is what you say it is, I love it." Just 4 hours later, then-candidate Donald Trump promised to give a speech with incriminating information on the Clintons during a campaign news conference. Listen to this.
I am going to give a major speech on probably Monday of next week. And we're going to be discussing all of the things that have taken place with the Clintons. I think you're going to find it very informative and very, very interesting.
That was June 7th, 2016, 2 days before this very, very important meeting. On June 9th, 2016, Donald Trump Jr., campaign chair Paul Manafort, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, met with a Russian lawyer, a former Russian spy, and others at Trump Tower. It was a crowded meeting. Revelations about that meeting didn't come out until a year later. On July 8th, 2017, Don Jr. downplayed the meeting that had happened a year and a month earlier, saying in a statement to the New York Times that they primarily discussed a program about the adoption of Russian children. Reports surfaced nearly a month later that President Trump helped draft that statement himself while aboard Air Force One, calling the meeting, quote, not a campaign issue at the time. On July 9th, just a day later, Don Jr. walked that back a bit, acknowledging that he did meet with the Russians for campaign information, but the meeting turned out to be about adoptions. 2 days later, on July 11th, Don Jr. appeared on Fox News with Sean Hannity and said this.
A lot of people are going to want to know this about your father. Mm-hmm. Did you tell your father anything about this?
No. It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
Okay, then the next day, in an exclusive interview with Reuters, the president was asked if he knew that his son was meeting with a Russian lawyer, replying, quote, no, that I didn't know until a couple of days ago when I heard about this. A week after that, July 19th, 2017, President Trump was pressed on whether he knew about that meeting prior in an interview with the New York Times.
I just heard there was an email requesting a meeting or something, requesting a meeting, that they have information on Hillary Clinton. And I said, I mean, that's standard political stuff.
Did you know at the time that they had the meeting?
No, I didn't know anything about the meeting.
Okay, so he just keeps on saying he didn't know. Then, in testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee in September of 2017, Don Jr., we're back to the son, claimed that his father, quote, wouldn't have wasted his time with it. I never spoke to my father about it. Okay, so that's the history of the Trumps continually denying that Donald Trump knew about this meeting. Joining me now is NBC legal analyst Danny Savalos and Ellie Honig, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Gentlemen, good to see you. The lie begins about the concept, Ellie, that this was about adoptions. So it's more detail than a lot of people want to get into, but Russia stopped the adoptions of Russian babies to America to protest the Magnitsky Act, which punished oligarchs with assets in America, which is very personal to Vladimir Putin. So the concept that there was this meeting about adoptions that had nothing to do with anything else is not plausible.
Yeah, it turned out to be a lie, as you just illustrated for us, Ali. And, you know, a lot of people are saying we're in a he said situation here. Cohen apparently is going to say Trump knew, Trump and others will deny it. And as a prosecutor, when you get in that situation, it's not just to throw up your hands and say, well, who knows? You have to look at the corroborating evidence. What do the external facts tell us? And the first one I would go to from a prosecutorial perspective is the lies. Why lie? Why is every person...
There's a lot of lying going on.
Yeah, and you would ask a jury, why is everybody who was in that room lying about it with this adoption cover? That's number one. There's other corroboration that supports Cohen, too. You remember the phone calls, the phone records from Don Jr. to this blocked number. And we know that the president had a blocked number right after Don Jr. finds out there's going to be a meeting and then right after the meeting itself. And so I think, again, that's another important piece of corroboration that would weigh on the scale towards Cohen's version of events.
So, Danny, this is interesting because he said, and presumably whoever's investigating this in the case of Cohen, the Southern District of New York, in the case of the Russia meeting, the Mueller investigation, they have one interesting piece of information, and that is Don Jr. has spoken to Congress and said something. That would make it a crime to have lied.
That's true. And there are other potential crimes that Cohen's information, if true, would bring everybody in the circle closer to criminal activity. I mean, forget even for the moment the Stormy Daniels and other payoffs, what potential crimes there are there. There's any aid or assistance or conspiracy to aid a foreign government in interfering with an election, which is also a potential crime. So there are a number of potential crimes. But when it goes to the Michael Cohen credibility issue, where Rudy Giuliani and Trump are being a little disingenuous, and particularly Rudy Giuliani, is his suggestion that the government would never use a witness with credibility problems. Ellie will tell you that is the essence of cooperating witness land. Cooperating witnesses are not Boy Scouts. You have to use a criminal to catch a criminal, and that's been the law in the United States for a long time. I guarantee you, Ellie could tell you right now about several criminals that he has used that are probably likable fellas that have credibility problems that are star cooperating witnesses.
Because if you're trying to get to the bottom of a fraud or a criminal act, the best person to have is someone else who might have been involved in it or who had first-hand knowledge.
Yeah, they're cooperating witnesses for a reason. And Danny nailed it. I mean, I've called cooperating witnesses who've done murders and put them on the stand, and they've testified against other people who are involved.
The point at that point is that you're creating credibility around the fact that they know the topic, and Trump's lawyers will attack that credibility on the basis of this guy desperately needs a deal, or he's trying to get out of, as Donald Trump says, some other issue.
Exactly. I mean, we say all the time, you know, you can't penetrate a closed, secretive network. I used to do mafia cases was the example. There are some comparisons here. You cannot penetrate that kind of network from the outside. You need an insider, and inherently, you know, if you're going to get inside a dirty organization like that, you're going to have dirty players. And, you know, one of the sort of stock lines we always used to use with a jury is, you know, we didn't choose Michael Cohen. You don't need to love the guy. But we didn't choose him. Donald Trump chose him when he made him his lawyer and when he committed crimes.
Yeah, I was on a bus yesterday and somebody said to me, I can't believe that I'm rooting for Michael Cohen. But when you speak of organized crime, and I just use this because there may have been a crime committed by an organization, in the movies they go for the lawyer and the finance guy, the money guy, right? And now they've got Michael Cohen, and they're now going after the accountant, the guy who was the CFO of the company, who may know Donald Trump longer than anybody because he worked for his father as well. And the bottom line is, if there were financial transactions, you and I discussed this the other day, everybody's caught up on whether it's a check or cash. But the fact is, if the company were involved in financial transactions, the accountant would know.
And lest you think that you can assert any kind of privilege when it comes to your accountant, be warned. There is no independent accountant-client privilege the way there is an attorney-client privilege.
That's interesting.
It may attach if the accountant is involved in conjunction with the attorney in helping the attorney provide legal advice. But there is no independent privilege for accountants. So if the accountant gets subpoenaed, if they approach the accountant, if there's evidence against the accountant, if his eyes have even seen things that they shouldn't have seen, then the government can probably extract that without any ability of a defendant or suspect.
This is really interesting, Kelly. So let's say this accountant, Weisselberg, has done nothing wrong independently. In other words, he may have written checks or arranged things, Does that make him part of something that's wrong?
Yeah, it might. It might. And people have said, what's going to happen? I mean, he's been subpoenaed. I think we know that. And if you are a defendant who has sort of gray area, potential criminal liability, the first thing you do, you take the Fifth. I mean, that's what it's there for, right? And I would guess he's going to invoke the Fifth Amendment. And then the ping pong sort of back on the government, the prosecutor's side of the table.
But by the way, there's no ability to exert executive privilege.
No, Danny's right about that. Yeah, I agree.
Not executive privilege or attorney or the attorney-client privilege, unless he can prove that those discussions all happened in the context of a meeting with Michael Cohen.
Correct. Yeah, Danny's right on the attorney-client, and I don't think executive privilege. I mean, the Nixon case.
It was not working for the president at the time.
That's for national security. That's not for this kind of thing. But if he invokes the Fifth, the prosecutors then have to make a decision. Do we want to immunize this guy?
Yeah.
And that's based on two things. One, are we willing to give him a pass?
Yep.
He seems like the kind of guy you would immunize. He seems like an enabler more than a primary doer. And second, do we want him as a witness? And, listen to that tape, right? The guy worked for the Trump Organization for 40 years. We heard 2 minutes. And they refer to him as he's the guy who's going to set up the phony show.
Why do you think he named him? I mean, he said our friend David, who we think is David Pecker from American Media, the owner of National Enquirer, but he took Alan's name, he gave his full name. Do you think that's important?
First, this is like that Yanni Laurel tape that we were listening to a couple months ago, because the way I heard it, I still keep open the possibility that they were talking about our friend David Dennison, his pseudonym, his nom de guerre, whatever that may be, but others seem to think that it's David Pecker. So
that's interesting, yeah.
Right. So if it is, no matter who the David is, the one thing that jumps out is the way Michael Cohen inexpertly uses these code words. And that's another sobering reality they're going to have to face, is that the government is very good at calling laypersons to testify as to what code words mean. So the more you use a code word in your discussions to try and evade capture, the more the government will seize on that and actually call their own witnesses to say, in my years of experience in law enforcement, this is what they were talking about. Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword.
My code word is bald eagle, but I think the government will figure that out real fast. I think the government calls me Chubby Bald Eagle. Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.